The crystalline ship descended through Earth's atmosphere like a falling star, its hull shimmering with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in rhythm with its pilot's heartbeat. Commander Vel of the Astron Collective had volunteered for this. Mission first contact with the species that had somehow survived on a world that should have been uninhabitable, the data streams flowing through Vel's neural implants painted a picture of impossibility. This planet called Earth harbored life, forms that thrived in conditions that would liquefy most known species. The atmospheric pressure alone should have crushed any delicate biological structures, yet these humans had not only survived but flourished across every continent. Vel's gelatinous form rippled with nervous energy as the ship's sensors detected the landing coordinates, a clearing beside what the humans called a forest. The trees towered above like ancient monuments, their wooden structures somehow maintaining rigidity despite the crushing gravitational forces. Everything about this world defied the collective's understanding of biological possibility. Initiating final descent, Vel whispered into the communication array, though the nearest collective vessel was 7 light cycles away. The isolation felt absolute, pressing against Vel's consciousness like the weight of the alien sky above. The ship touched down with barely a whisper, its organic hull automatically adjusting to the foreign soil. Through the transparent sections of the vessel, Vel could see the alien landscape in all its terrifying beauty. Massive trees stretched toward a blue sky that seemed impossibly bright, while strange flowering plants dotted the ground, in vibrant colors that hurt to perceive directly, but it was the figure approaching from the tree line that made Vel's entire being quiver with anticipation and fear. The human walked with a fluid grace that seemed to mock the planet's crushing gravity. Its bipedal form moved with purpose and confidence, each step demonstrating the kind of structural integrity that Vel's species could only achieve through technological augmentation. This creature was doing it naturally, as if defying physics was simply part of its biology. As the human drew closer, Vel could make out individual features through the ship's enhanced sensors. The being's face held an expression of curiosity rather than fear, a detail that sent cascades of confusion through Vel's neural networks. By all rights, this first contact scenario should have terrified any rational species. Yet the human approached as if greeting an old friend. The human stopped just outside the ship's perimeter and raised one of its manipulator appendages in what the collective's cultural databases suggested was a peaceful gesture. When it spoke, the sound waves traveled through the thick atmosphere with startling clarity. "Welcome to Earth," the human said, its voice carrying warmth that seemed to resonate through the very air. "I'm Alex. We've been waiting for you." Every great bond starts with a single moment of courage. HFY Chronicle Stories is just beginning, and your support matters. If you love emotional sci-fi tales, forbidden connections, and stories that stay with you, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us bring more stories from the stars to you. Vel's entire worldview shifted in that moment. The collective had prepared for countless scenarios: hostility, fear, incomprehension. But they had never prepared for this genuine welcome from a species that somehow knew they were coming. The ship's airlock cycled through its decontamination sequence, and Vel approached the threshold between their world and this impossible one. Every instinct screamed warnings about the dangers that lay beyond the crushing atmosphere, the corrosive oxygen, the brutal gravity that could flatten Vel's delicate form in moments. But stronger than fear was curiosity, and stronger than caution was the growing realization that these humans represented something unprecedented in the galaxy. Vel extended a translucent tendril toward the airlock controls, knowing that this single action would change everything for both species forever. Moment Vel's biosuit made contact with Earth's atmosphere, every sensor in the Astron's body screamed warnings. The oxygen concentration was beyond lethal. It should have been like breathing liquid fire. The gravity was crushing, the atmospheric pressure sufficient to liquefy most forms of complex life. Yet somehow and possibly, Vel's emergency bioprotection systems held. Alex stepped forward, and Vel could see the human's features more clearly now through the shimmering field of the protective suit. The being's eyes held an intelligence that seemed to burn with its own inner light, and its smile conveyed emotions that Vel's universal translators could identify but not fully comprehend. "You're smaller than we expected," Alex said gently, crouching down to bring himself closer to Vel's height. The gesture sent ripples of shock through Vel's neural network. No predator species would voluntarily reduce its apparent size when confronting an unknown entity. "But then again, we're probably bigger than you expected too." Vel's voice synthesizer crackled to life, producing sounds that approximated human speech patterns. "Your world. It should not support complex life. The readings we collected suggest conditions that would dissolve most biological matter within moments." Alex's laugh was like music, rich and warm despite the alien atmosphere that carried it. "Yeah, Earth's pretty intense. We've had millions of years to adapt though. Makes you wonder what we could survive if we had to, doesn't it?" The casual way Alex spoke about surviving the unsurvivable sent cascades of information racing through Vel's consciousness. This wasn't bravado or posturing. It was simple fact stated with the confidence of a species that had never known limits. "Would you like to see more?" Alex asked, gesturing toward the forest beyond. "I know your time here might be limited, but there's something I think you should experience." Vel's biosuit registered massive spikes in external toxicity as they moved deeper into the woodland. Every plant they passed was producing chemical compounds that would be lethal to most known life forms. The very air was thick with organic molecules that should have been breaking down Vel's cellular structure despite the protective barriers. Yet the human walked among it all as if strolling through paradise. They came to a clearing where a small stream bubbled over rocks worn smooth by countless cycles of erosion. Alex knelt beside the water and cupped some in his hands, holding it out toward Vel like an offering. "This is what we're made of, mostly," Alex said. "Hydrogen and oxygen, same as what's trying to kill you right now. We're basically walking chemical reactions that figured out how to think." Vel's sensors analyzed the water and confirmed readings that defied comprehension. The liquid contained trace elements that would be toxic to most species, dissolved minerals in concentrations that should have been lethal, and microscopic life forms that existed in symbiotic relationships of staggering complexity. "Your species," Vel managed to say, voice synthesizer struggling with the concepts. "You have weaponized your own biology?" Alex's expression grew thoughtful. "Not weaponized exactly. We just never learned that some things were supposed to be impossible. Our ancestors crawled out of oceans that would melt your ship's hull, breathed air that was poison, and decided that wasn't going to stop them from reaching for the stars." The human stood and placed his hands on his hips, looking up at the sky, where Vel's ship waited like a gleaming jewel against the blue expanse. "When we detected your approach 6 months ago, we realized something important. If we could survive Earth, maybe we were meant to help others survive what they thought they couldn't." Vel's entire understanding of galactic civilization shifted like tectonic plates grinding against each other. The collective had spent millennia mapping the boundaries of possibility, carefully cataloging what forms of life could exist under which conditions. These humans had simply ignored those boundaries entirely. "Your offer of assistance," Vel said carefully, "what would it entail?" Alex's smile broadened, and for the first time since landing, Vel began to understand why this species had thrived on a world that should have been their tomb. They didn't just endure the impossible, they embraced it, learned from it, and offered to share that knowledge with others. "Everything," Alex said simply. "We'd like to share everything." As they walked deeper into the forest, Vel began to notice details that the ship's sensors had missed entirely. The symbiotic relationships between species weren't just complex, they were impossibly intricate. Trees that should have been competing for resources were instead sharing nutrients through underground networks that spanned entire ecosystems. Insects that should have been predators worked together in cooperative swarms that defied every model of evolutionary development. Your entire planet, Vel observed, voice synthesizer humming with strain, operates as a single organism. Alex nodded, running his fingers along the bark of a massive oak that towered above them like a living cathedral. Took us a while to figure that out ourselves. We spent centuries thinking we were separate from nature, trying to conquer it instead of working with it. Nearly destroyed ourselves in the process. The humans' casual admission of near extinction sent warning signals cascading through Vel's neural networks. Species that came close to self-destruction typically carried genetic markers for aggression and territorial behavior that made them unsuitable for galactic citizenship. Yet everything about Alex suggested the opposite, a being so integrated with his environment that he seemed to draw strength from it. They reached a grove where the canopy opened to reveal patches of sky, and Alex gestured for Vel to observe. A phenomenon that defied every law of physics the collective had established. Plants throughout the clearing were converting the star's radiation into chemical energy, with an efficiency that approached 100%. No known technology could match what these simple biological structures achieved naturally. Photosynthesis, Alex explained, noticing Vel's sensors working frantically to analyze the process. Plants eat sunlight and breathe out oxygen. It's why our atmosphere is so toxic to you. It's actually waste product from biological processes that have been running for billions of years. Vel's biosuit registered critical alerts as the implications became clear. These humans weren't just surviving in a toxic environment. They were thriving in the waste products of the most efficient energy conversion system ever discovered. They had built their entire civilization on top of processes that other species would consider industrial accidents. The other members of the collective, Vel said slowly, they will need to understand this. Your species represents capabilities that we believed were theoretically impossible. Alex's expression grew serious. That's what I was hoping you'd say. You see, we've been watching the galactic community for quite some time. Your ships leave traces that our astronomers can detect, even from this distance. We've seen the patterns of expansion, the careful way you map habitable worlds. The human sat on a fallen log that probably weighed more than Vel's entire ship, treating the massive structure as if it were furniture designed for his comfort. What we've noticed is that your definition of habitable is incredibly narrow. You're missing 99% of the worlds that could support life if you knew how to adapt. Vel's consciousness reeled under the weight of this revelation. The collective had spent millions of cycles cataloging exactly 17,000 worlds capable of supporting their forms of life. The mathematical implications of Alex's statement suggested possibilities that could reshape galactic civilization entirely. You're proposing some form of biological enhancement, Vel concluded. Modification of existing species to survive in previously uninhabitable environments. Alex shook his head, and his smile held depths that Vel was only beginning to fathom. Not modification, partnership, you see. Earth doesn't just produce hardy life forms. It produces life forms that help other life forms become hardy. We've got bacteria that can break down toxins, fungi that can establish symbiotic relationships with almost any biology, and plants that can terraform environments just by existing in them. The human gestured toward the forest around them, and Vel began to see it with new understanding. This wasn't just an ecosystem, it was a biological laboratory that had been running experiments in survival for billions of years. Every species present represented a solution to some form of environmental challenge. What we're offering, Alex continued, is not just our knowledge, but our partners. Life forms that have spent eons learning how to make the impossible survivable. With the right symbiotic relationships, your people could explore worlds that you've written off as completely hostile. Vel's entire species had evolved under the assumption that survival required careful avoidance of danger. These humans had evolved under the assumption that danger was just another problem to be solved through cooperation and adaptation. The paradigm shift was so profound that Vel's neural network struggled to process it fully. The return journey to Vel's ship took them through terrain that served as a living demonstration of Alex's promises. Every ecosystem they encountered showcased principles that could revolutionize galactic civilization. Desert plants that could extract moisture from air with humidity levels that wouldn't register on most sensors. Alpine flowers that thrived in conditions that mimicked the vacuum of space. Aquatic organisms that processed heavy metals and radioactive isotopes as if they were nutrients. The diversity index of your world, Vel observed, watching as Alex casually identified dozens of species within a single square meter of forest floor, exceeds theoretical maximums by several orders of magnitude. Alex laughed, the sound carrying easily through the dense atmosphere that should have muffled all communication. Wait until you see what we've got in the deep ocean trenches, or the life forms that exist around our volcanic vents. Some of our extremophiles can survive direct exposure to stellar radiation. The casual way Alex mentioned organisms that could survive conditions found in the hearts of stars sent shockwaves through Vel's cognitive processes. The collective's most advanced protective technologies couldn't withstand a fraction of such environmental stress. As they approached the landing site, Vel's ship came into view, a masterpiece of Astron biotechnology that represented millions of cycles of careful development. Beside it, Alex had set up what appeared to be a simple shelter constructed from local materials. "You built that while I was conducting atmospheric analysis?" Vel asked, sensors detecting architectural principles that shouldn't have been possible using primitive materials. "Took about 20 minutes, Alex replied with a shrug. "Trees here grow with grain patterns that provide structural integrity along multiple stress vectors. Once you understand the biology, the engineering follows naturally." The human had constructed a building that could probably withstand impacts that would destroy Vel's ship, and he'd done it as casually as breathing. More disturbing was the realization that this wasn't even noteworthy by human standards. Alex treated it as a minor convenience rather than a technological achievement. As they settled beside the shelter, Alex began pulling items from containers that Vel hadn't noticed him carrying. Food, by the look of it, though the energy readings suggested nutritional density that exceeded anything in the collective's databases. "Would you like to try something?" Alex asked, holding out what appeared to be a simple fruit. "I should probably mention that this apple contains more concentrated nutrients than most species consume in a full cycle. Might want to just scan it rather than actually eating it." Vel's sensors confirmed readings that defied biological possibility. The fruit contained proteins, carbohydrates, vitamins, and minerals in combinations that represented perfect nutritional balance for at least 17 different physiological systems. It was as if the plant had evolved specifically to provide optimal nourishment for any conceivable form of life. "Your food sources," Vel said carefully, "they appear to be designed for universal consumption." Alex nodded, taking a bite of the apple with obvious enjoyment. "Most of Earth's edible plants work that way. Had to, really. Our ancestors were omnivores who needed to extract nutrition from whatever they could find. Plants that couldn't feed a wide variety of species didn't survive the selection pressure. The implications were staggering. Earth hadn't just evolved organisms that could survive impossible conditions. It had evolved organisms specifically adapted to support other life forms under those same impossible conditions. The entire planet was essentially a biological support system designed to nurture any form of life that encountered it. "The collective will need extensive proof," Vel said finally. "What you're describing challenges fundamental assumptions about the nature of biological possibility." Alex's expression grew thoughtful, and he was quiet for several moments before responding. I understand the skepticism. Really, I do. But here's the thing, we've already been conducting the proof-of-concept experiments. Those bacterial samples you collected from your ship's exterior during decontamination? They're not just still alive, they're thriving. Vel's entire nervous system went rigid with shock. The decontamination process should have sterilized every surface of the ship with radiation levels that would eliminate any known form of life. Yet Alex was claiming that Earth organisms had not only survived, but flourished under conditions designed to be absolutely lethal. Furthermore, Alex continued gently, your biosuit has been gradually adapting to our atmosphere for the past several hours. The symbiotic organisms we introduced during your atmospheric exposure have been slowly modifying your protection systems to make them more efficient. Vel ran immediate diagnostics and discovered readings that should have been impossible. The biosuit was indeed operating at enhanced efficiency levels, and biological analysis revealed the presence of Earth organisms that were somehow improving rather than degrading the protective systems. You've been conducting biological modification without consent, Vel said, though the accusation carried no heat. The evidence suggested that the modifications were beneficial rather than harmful. Alex smiled, and there was something profound in his expression, an understanding that reached across species barriers. We've been conducting biological cooperation with consent. Your systems welcomed our organisms because they recognized beneficial symbiosis when they encountered it. That's how life works here, not through domination, but through partnership. The final hours before Vel's departure were spent in quiet conversation beside the improvised shelter, with Alex sharing insights that would reshape the collective's understanding of life itself. The human spoke of evolutionary principles that treated survival not as competition between species, but as collaboration toward greater complexity and resilience. The thing most civilizations miss, Alex explained, watching the sun begin its descent toward the horizon, is that consciousness isn't separate from biology. It's the natural result of biological systems becoming complex enough to understand themselves. Your people, our people, were all just star matter that learned how to think. Vel's neural networks had been processing data continuously since landing, but this simple statement reframed everything in ways that felt simultaneously obvious and revolutionary. The collective had always viewed consciousness as something that transcended biology, but these humans understood it as the ultimate expression of biological possibility. When you return to your people, Alex continued, they'll want proof that what you've experienced here is real. They'll run tests, conduct analyses, debate possibilities. That's natural and necessary. But I want you to remember something important. The human reached out and gently touched the surface of Vel's biosuit with one finger. The contact should have been meaningless, two different forms of life separated by technological barriers. Instead, Vel felt something that had no name in any collective language. A recognition that transcended species, a connection that operated on levels deeper than conscious thought. Every form of life in the galaxy is connected, Alex said softly. We're all expressions of the same fundamental forces, all products of the same cosmic evolution. The barriers between species aren't real. They're just ideas we carry because we haven't learned to see past them yet. Vel's biosuit registered changes that the ship's medical systems would later classify as impossible. Cellular structures were reorganizing themselves at the molecular level. Genetic sequences were optimizing for greater efficiency, and biological processes were achieving integration levels that exceeded anything in collective scientific literature. But more profound than the physical changes was the shift in understanding. Vel could feel the connection Alex described, not as abstract concept, but as lived reality. The boundaries between self and environment, between individual consciousness and universal awareness, were dissolving like barriers made of mist. The first alien who touched human soil, Alex said with a gentle smile, didn't dissolve from our world's hostility. They dissolved into our world's embrace. You're not the same being who landed here, Vel. There's something new, a bridge between what was and what could be. As Vel's ship lifted off from Earth's surface, carrying biological samples and data recordings that would revolutionize galactic civilization, the Astron commander understood that the human had been absolutely correct. The being who departed was fundamentally different from the one who had arrived, transformed not by destruction, but by integration. The journey back to collective space would take several cycles, but Vel was no longer traveling alone. Microscopic Earth organisms continued their symbiotic work throughout the ship's systems, gradually transforming Astron technology into something unprecedented, hybrid systems that combine the best qualities of both civilizations. When Vel finally delivered the report to the Collective Council, the data would spark the greatest expansion in galactic history. Worlds previously considered uninhabitable would become garden paradises. Species that had been trapped on single planets would spread across entire star systems. The rigid boundaries that had defined galactic civilization for millions of cycles would dissolve like morning frost under the warmth of new possibilities. But perhaps most importantly, the galaxy would learn what humans had always known, that life's greatest strength comes not from resisting change, but from embracing it. Not from fighting the impossible, but from discovering that impossibility itself was just another problem to be solved through cooperation, adaptation, and the fundamental recognition that all consciousness shares the same source. The first alien who touched human soil had indeed dissolved, but not into nothingness. Instead, Vel had dissolved into something far greater, a living proof that the universe's greatest miracles happen when different forms of life choose to trust each other enough to become something entirely new. And across the galaxy, species that had spent eons believing in their own limitations began to dream of stars they had never imagined they could reach, carried there by the simple, revolutionary idea that impossibility was just another word for opportunity waiting to be discovered.